Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. I consider myself extremely blessed to be alive in this age of Souls-like gaming, as the divine rulers of the video game industry, Fromsoft, continue to grace us with banger after banger for a simple lowly tarnished to enjoy.
Oh, that was
I was fucking clowning on this guy, and he beat me with some bullshit, dude. Hello everyone, Troy here, and that's right, be ready for some glazing here, folks. I'm about to grab it with both hands, and, give the good old hawk tuh, you know what I'm saying? The hawk tuh!
Spit on that thing, you get me?
Although it's not all 100% perfect, and I definitely do have some opinions, but we will go ahead and get to all that later. If there's anything that you should take away from this video, it's that yes, Shadow of the Erdtree is a phenomenal expansion to an already masterpiece of a video game. And so if it interests you at all, you should just go play it already. Now, it's absolutely no secret that I love and adore Elden Ring. I consider it one of the greatest games of all time, and for me personally, it might be my favorite game of all time. I'd have to think on it a bit, but it's definitely at least top 3 for me. So my expectations for Shadow of the Erdtree were extremely high. Although our Lord and Savior, Miyazaki, did his usual shtick of under-promising and over-delivering in order to keep expectations reeled in. Like, he said the map would be the size of Limgrave, which is like the starting area in Elden Ring, and that's a bit on the small side, and, well, that was an absolute lie.
The lie detector determined that was a lie.
The Shadow Realm is so much larger than that. And it's so refreshing to see a developer market in this way, rather than the usual overpromise and underdeliver. It's like they know what they're releasing is gonna be good, and it's just gonna sell itself. They don't have to lie.
These NPCs are not scripted.
Anyways, a little bit off topic, but Shadow of the Erdtree, yeah, I was blown away. Everything that I needed out of this expansion, I got. It's more Elden Ring, and some of the best of Elden Ring. Some of the best bosses, the best weapons, the best locations, and even more surprisingly, some of the best characters. Shadow of the Erdtree really captured the feelings I had when I explored the base game of Elden Ring for the first time. Feelings of wonder, anticipation, of frustration, and of accomplishment. However, Shadow of the Erdtree, like the base game Elden Ring, is not completely perfect, but it's damn near close. And we will go ahead and get into all that, but before we do, I'd like to remind everyone, if you enjoy this video or my content, please do not forget to like and subscribe. From full reviews to tier lists, I just simply love to talk about the video games that I'm currently playing here on my channel. And it's not just Fromsoft and Souls-like, although that is one of my favorite genres. But if any of that interests you at all, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and thank you so much. Also, I will be avoiding major spoilers, but I will show some of the early bosses as well as some of the ones that were in a lot of the promotional content, such as Mesmer himself, but I will not give any details around the story or show any optional later bosses, as some of them are just super fucking cool, and I really recommend you try and experience that raw. Alright, so let me go ahead and get some glazing out of the way here. Alright, one of Shadow of the Erdtree's biggest strengths is just the amount of content presented here. Now, this is a shot in the dark, but it really feels like the Shadow Realm is about 2/3 of the size of the lands between. And for about 2/3 the cost of the base game, that already checks out really nicely, as Elden Ring already felt like an absolute steal for only $60. That's right, Elden Ring came out when games were only $60, and it's still $60, so. All right, the map's about 2/3 the size. Well, what about the density of the content here? I'd say about on par with the base game as well, if even a bit denser in some areas. Looking at the Remembrance bosses, which are your big set-piece main bosses, there are 15 in the base game and 10 in Shadow of the Erdtree. Again, 2/3 of the base game, aligning very well with the cost and size of the map. It looks like Fromsoft really ran the numbers here. And for a developer that has their usual level of quality, I would expect nothing less. Also, there's one optional boss, Bale, who I won't spoil anything else other than his name, because he's super badass. But if you know, you know. He isn't technically a remembrance boss, but goddamn, he does really play like one. Hell, he plays like one of the best bosses in the entire game. And there are a few other minor bosses here that are just as memorable and high quality as some of the major ones. So I would say that Shadow of the Erdtree is actually denser in some cases than the base game. It's phenomenal. So you could argue that you're actually getting more content for your money in some cases in Shadow of the Erdtree than the base game Elden Ring. Shadow of the Erdtree took me about 45 hours to complete, and I did all the major content as well as a good amount of the side content. So there is plenty of bang for your buck here. So speaking of great bosses, we've established the quantity of content, but what about the quality? Well, again, I'm happy to say that yes, some of the bosses present here in Shadow of the Erdtree, I believe, are among some of the greatest bosses that Fromsoft has ever produced. Now, along with that, I do think there are some flops, some dragons that aren't really all that interesting, and just some boring creatures here and there. But the main remembrance bosses for me were all at least pretty good to just absolute bangers. My personal favorite, and I believe the best boss of the DLC, is Poster Boy Mesmer himself. This guy slaps. Everything from the lore to his visual design to his cutscenes are so cinematic. He's also extremely challenging yet fair, and all of this just creates what I believe to be one of the most memorable bosses that FromSoft has ever produced. And yes, the bosses here are all extremely challenging with extended combos and just insane movesets. Let's go! Fuck you. Woo! Solo Mesmer. Let's fucking go. And going off that, let's go and talk about the difficulty of Shadow of the Erdtree, which has been a very hot topic. From Software games have always been touted as difficult, and being difficult is a core pillar of the experience. If you weren't aware, Shadows actually got review bombed on Steam during its first week because a lot of players thought it was too difficult. And to that, I have to say, get good and use a damn summon, you pussy. You know, the way that FromSoft approached difficulty with Elden Ring by making it more accessible while simultaneously one of their most difficult games was nothing short of genius. The difficulty settings of Elden Ring are baked into the game in the way of tools that you can utilize. This allowed them to create these insanely hard bosses, you know, some of the hardest bosses out of any Souls game, while still giving more casual players or players with lives outside of gaming, or maybe ones that just don't really enjoy banging their heads against a wall, you know, tools like summons or items or OP weapons to actually still beat the bosses. It was very creative and it worked. I believe it's one of the reasons why Elden Ring achieved mainstream success while maintaining a more hardcore audience. Now, there is a toxic side of the Souls community, that is for sure, where people feel like they can't use certain builds or summons because they need to beat the game as a level 1 wretch with a club, as well as they'll tout that other people who use these are lesser and can't enjoy the game. Now, if you can play the game like this and challenge yourself like that, that's fucking awesome. Congrats. You are very, very good at Elden Ring. Is that what you wanted to hear? Is that the validation that you needed? But a lot of the more hardcore audience are now whining because Shadow of the Erdtree is too hard. So the irony here is just very blatant. Like Miyazaki himself came out and said that he uses summons. The beauty of Elden Ring is that you can play and enjoy it however you want. And Shadow of the Erdtree is nothing different. But is it too difficult? Well, to access the expansion, you need to defeat Mohg, the Lord of Blood, whom is an extremely challenging endgame boss of the base game. Now, it only makes sense for the DLC to pick up right where the base game left off. So no, it is not too challenging. This difficulty makes sense. It's not like a spike. If it was the same difficulty, or God, even easier than the base game, that would just be fucking stupid. I know I just kind of spouted on about difficulty and I'm probably rambling a little bit, but my point being is that yes, Shadow of the Erdtree is very difficult, but no, it's not too difficult because the difficulty makes sense and you have the ability to equip yourself with the necessary tools to overcome these challenges. In which this leads me to my next point. The new tools and weapons that are presented to you in Shadow of the Erdtree are for the most part pretty fantastic. There's something like 100 new weapons here, and most of the ones I got my hands on are just badass. My personal favorite were the backhand blades that were just super fast and looked sick. There's also like hand-to-hand now, and beast claws, and light great swords, and just the list goes on. Almost everything that I tried, I thought, wow, you know, there could be some cool builds with this. And I am super excited to see what the community comes up with. You know, one of Elden Ring's biggest strengths was the insane combat sandbox, and to see Shadows of the Erdtree expand on it in this way was nothing short of fantastic. Along with new weapons, Shadow of the Erdtree also introduces a unique progression system in the Scadutree fragments. Yeah, I guess that's how you say it. Scadutree, Scadutree, whatever. Skibbity tree. Which, if you don't know, they're simply an item that you collect from exploring the world. They can be awards for beating certain bosses or found in interesting locations around the map. You can then spend these items to give your character a flat increase to damage dished out and a decrease to damage taken. But this is only applied in the DLC area of the Shadow Realm. And from what I've seen online, this has been a bit divisive. Some claim it's too simple and basic and lacks meaningful depth. Then there were some, including myself, that think these were actually pretty clever, and I believe that for three main reasons. One, the Scadutree fragments actually encourage exploration. Pretty self-explanatory, you know, these are hidden around the world, you're gonna go explore the world. Two, it nerfs high-level players coming into the expansion with over-leveled characters, hoping to recreate that feeling you had in the beginning of Elden Ring. And three, with how deep and varied the character building already is, creating anything more complicated would have made it necessary to be applied outside of the expansion into the base game as well, probably creating a balancing nightmare. Creating something simple like this allows this to be localized only in the expansion. And so for these reasons, I feel that the progression system is fantastic in Shadow of the Erdtree. Sometimes less is more, and it's never felt more true than with the Scadutree fragments, whatever. If there's one critique I have, it's the fucking name. Now, well, you might be saying, Troy, the Scadutree fragments incentivize exploration, but is the world even worth exploring like that? Well, oh boy, oh boy. The base game map of the Lands Between was already a masterpiece in world design. Not only for its visual and varied beauty, but by the way it was traversed and uncovered. And the Shadow Realm kicks it up a notch. The Shadow Realm is just as beautiful as the Lands Between, with all different types of interesting and unique biomes with their own weird and twisted enemies. There are beautiful coasts, dark forests, massive castles, with each being interesting and beautiful. In my opinion, none of the locations were misses. However, the big standout here is how the Shadow Realm also introduces a whole new sense of verticality. The Lands Between had some of this, sure, but the Shadow Realm really feels like a tightly layered and almost maze-like cake. You know, finding routes between one layer to another is a whole challenge in itself. I've seen individual areas of video games that have a sense of verticality like this, sure, but never an entire world. And honestly, exploring it at times can give you a sense of frustration, but the reward of discovering these new areas is well worth it. Similar to how the frustration of a Fromsoft boss is well worth the payoff of victory. Plus, if you ever get lost here, there's like a million guides out there, so don't be ashamed if that's how you prefer to play. That's why the community's here. I could go on and on about why I think Shadow of the Erdtree is great, but for the sake of brevity, let's go ahead and get straight to the point. Is Shadow of the Erdtree the perfect expansion? Well, I already said in my intro that Shadows isn't perfect. So then what are my gripes here? Well, they're mostly nitpicky, but one big annoyance that I have is there really needs to be more options for respecking. To my knowledge, there are 9 larval tiers available in Shadow of the Erdtree. To be fair, 9 isn't a bad number, but you know, for how many weapons, spells, and other items that are introduced here in Shadow of the Erdtree, I really wish there would be more, but even better yet, there should be a way to farm larval tiers. I'm a really big proponent of unlimited respecs. I think they're a great way to fight choice paralysis, as well as make things a little bit more accessible for players who may not have the time to replay the game multiple times. Also, there could be more ancient dragon smithing stones to max out all these weapons you gave us. I see no reason why Fromsoft feels the need to restrict these outside of wanting to waste the player's time and force multiple playthroughs. Then there are the spirit ashes or summons, which I've already established that I don't have any issue with them being in the game, but I do question why there are so fucking many. And this is also an issue that I had with the base game, but I was hoping that Shadows would address it a bit. Like, why do I go through a dungeon, fight a boss, just to get the 40th Spirit Ash that I will never even want to use? There was only one from the expansion that I messed around with because the summon reminds everyone, including myself, of Yoda, and that's kind of cool, I guess. I just think the mechanic would be way more interesting if they made them more unique and fit into certain builds better. Or they could just only have like 5 summons in the whole game and give us like 50 more weapons. I would way rather have that. I do also want to quickly mention that I played on the PS5 and ran into almost no bugs or technical issues. Now, I do know that a lot of people are complaining about issues on the PC. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there in case there are people watching this that are thinking about buying it on PC, just to give you a heads up. All right, so Shadow of the Erdtree. Yeah, it's pretty damn awesome. It's the cherry on top to what was an absolutely fantastic ice cream sundae. Some might even say the best ice cream sundae of all time. There are even a few things that Fromsoft has improved on. The story is a bit more direct here, which I really enjoyed, as I'm not a huge fan of Fromsoft's usual obtuseness. Characters will be more clear when they talk to you. Also, the normal dungeons have a bit more variety. You know, the list goes on. Fromsoft has seemingly done the impossible. They took a 10 out of 10 masterpiece game and somehow took a step in the right direction, listening to certain criticisms and seemingly improving on the near perfect. So because of that, I have no choice but to give Shadow of the Erdtree a 10 out of 10. Yes, it's not absolutely perfect, but nothing is. Show me one game or piece of media that is absolutely perfect. I'm waiting. It doesn't exist because they're made by humans and they reflect the human condition. It's a bit of a reach, but you know what I'm saying. Shadow of the Erdtree is everything that I wanted out of Elden Ring's expansion. It's more Elden Ring, more bosses, more weapons, more locations, all while keeping the same quality, if not even better than the base game. What more could you want? And yes, it is very difficult. Very, very difficult. But honestly, if that's why you don't like Shadow of the Erdtree, bud, you gotta get good because the expansion kicks ass and you're really missing out. Now, I really do wonder what is next for Fromsoft. This is apparently Elden Ring's only expansion, and Miyazaki doesn't really like to do sequels. I really hope Elden Ring doesn't get the Bloodborne treatment, or at least gets another spiritual successor like how Elden Ring kind of was to Dark Souls, but we will see. Whatever Fromsoft does, I'm confident that it will kick ass. For me, they are the undisputed champs of the video game industry right now, and I hope they really keep the ball rolling.
That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and if you aren't already, please consider liking this video and subscribing. Also, drop a comment below. You know, I look forward to hearing what you all think of Fromsoft and Elden Ring and, you know, the get good culture, whatever you want, just let it off your chest. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.